Yeah. So I think it's just trying to like manage the expectation and goal.
That's the theme of this whole
That's
podcast.
true.
Is we are the wet blanket to your
To your
skincare
occlusive dreams.
All right, welcome back to the Chemist Confessions podcast. I'm Gloria.
I'm Victoria.
This is a human conversations on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily. And today we have a very intense episode. It is getting cooler, and to continue
Cooler.
Yes,
Cooler.
hashtag SoCal cooler. But we figured it's a good time to get into occlusives and continue conversation we started last week. So today's all about the science of occlusives.
All that balmy goodness.
Yep.
All right.
But before all that, let's get into a couple nice words.
All right. First nice word is about our double play. This is our face and eye retinol treatment. The title is Great Product. This person writes, I have been using Chemist Confessions retinol double play since October 2022 and have only this August started a new tube. Great longevity of product. I apply 1 or 2 pumps each evening to my face and neck and haven't noticed a marked and have noticed, wow, keyword, and have noticed a marked improvement in my skin. My marionette lines are plumped and less noticeable. Age-related hyperpigmentation is lessened. I have not experienced any sensitivity or redness with this regular usage. I especially like the efficient packaging, enabling the user to extract the full tube worth of product without wastage. So much fancy packaging prevents efficient extraction of the product, resulting in expensive wastage.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. When she wrote marionette lines, I'm like, wow, she knows.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a term that's not regularly used in people's vocabulary. So
yeah, thank you so much. And yes, continued usage of these type of intensive actives will get you that long-term result. And I did want to mention that I know sometimes we get some feedback on double play that says, oh, it's a little early to know.
Yeah.
So for all of you out there who's tried or consider trying double play, definitely like keep up with it for longer term. The clinical we ran lasted for a full 12 weeks to see the results. And if you've left us a review on double play and still early in journey, really appreciate it if you give us an update on it.
Yeah, let us know. All right. The next 2 products the next 2 nice words are about our Bon Voyage because it is coming back in stock this week.
Any day now.
So yeah, we're going to just do a little highlight.
Yep. The title is Pricey for Size, but excellent. And the review goes, I was surprised by how small the tube is, but I think it will last a good while. I'm most impressed by the feel. The way it melts and spreads is so lovely. My eyes are so dry. I use this over my night cream to lock it in. Also on my cheeks, lips, hands, and feet. It's wonderful. I'm glad it's fragrance-free as well. 1 star off for the price.
Yeah, this lady gave us 4 stars, but I did really want to share this because I think sometimes that is a surprise for people. And we understand too. But we also have to tell you how expensive this formula is to make. Because we proudly and really wanted to make sure there was enough ceramides to help, especially for the purpose of this product, which was to really tackle those like dry patches and just when your skin's in a pinch, like this is that product. So that's why I felt like we have to talk about this review.
Yeah, for sure.
We understand.
But it is expected to last a long time.
Yes,
it is a little bit.
A long way,
yep.
Sure.
Even for me, I have really dry skin. So I like that the Bon Voyage texture we formulated specifically so you can spread a very thin layer.
Yeah.
So it's very effective, but you don't need that really stuffy Vaseline you're clunking your face on with like
clunking your face.
Yeah. Yeah. You know how that goes.
Yep. Exactly. All right. And the last one is about Bon Voyage. The title is Saves My Skin. This person writes, this balm has helped my skin so much. I use it frequently in the winter at night when I'm feeling extra dry for a hydration boost. I also use it in the summer on days where I spent a lot of time in the sun. Even with sunscreen reapplication, I can sometimes still have sun sensitivity, but if I use this balm at night, I can lessen and sometimes avoid those irritation breakouts. I thought that was really interesting. I've also used it to successfully calm a sunburn. Always have this balm as an option in my routine.
And that's the other aspect to Bon Voyage and to our entire moisturizer line is we really feel like the missing piece in a lot of moisturizer is that soothing ingredient.
Totally.
And soothers in general, I think, is a loosely abused category because a lot of it do come from plants.
Loosely. Strong loose.
Yeah. There are a lot of great extracts in this category, but what that means is a lot of products just kind of like drizzle it in there. And the Balm Voyage, the soother of choice is Boswellia serrata at 2.5%, so it's very potent. And it doesn't help the price of Balm Voyage, but it helps soothe your skin.
We so good at business.
Yes.
Yes, but we are very proud of that. And we also just want to give a shout out and a thank you to all of those that do leave us their reviews.
Mhm.
We recommend you guys to definitely check them out, browse them. A lot of them leave their skin type and their routines, which is also very helpful to, for others to find, their experiences and find similar experiences to their skin type. So yeah, and we do not pay for any of them.
For podcast listeners, please use the code PODCASTSHIP to get free shipping on any order. And if you want to try out Balm Voyage, it is coming back in stock any day now. Please go to the product page and sign up for a waitlist, and you'll be the first to know.
Yep. All right. Now it's time to get into the meat.
Ooh, it's meat part 1. It's a dense meat. Woo.
Oh, God.
All right, wake me up when you're done.
All right. So, in meat part 1, we're going to talk about occlusives. We're going to try to explain what occlusives do to skin. And we're going to try to paint a picture of all the tests that have been done around occlusives, specifically around petrolatum.
Yep.
All right. So, first things first, we should explain what is an occlusive, Gloria?
Occlusives is actually a pretty straightforward concept, and it came from the medical field. It's a really good physical barrier. So think about gloves, wound dressings, things that are supposed to shield either you from the elements or, say, your physician from your dirty blood.
Well, I don't know what the physician did.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's how this term generally originated. But we are going to focus on occlusives in skincare. And what that means are these are occlusive ingredients. Typically, these are the butters and waxes and petrolatum that you often hear about. They don't necessarily penetrate the surface of skin very well and intend seal in the moisture within your stratum corneum because that water evaporation is what leads to dry skin. And these ingredients can be very effective and very helpful. I think, as Gloria said many times before, this is one of a few moisturizing categories that contribute to your overall skin hydration and skin barrier health.
So we should review the concept of TOOL really quickly. TOOL stands for transepidermal water loss. Like Victoria mentioned, occlusives is basically ingredients that sit on your skin and prevent this water loss from getting too crazy. We should mention that TOOL is normal. This process just happens because the water in your skin exists on gradient.
Yeah.
You are always evaporating water from your skin. The goal is not to take it down to zero. The goal is to not let it get too high.
Exactly. Enter occlusives.
Yes.
The idea is that these occlusives, the goal is to almost instantly, but very quickly reduce TOOL. But this mechanism is not necessarily most well understood phenomenon, which is crazy because you think that the concept is very simple and straightforward. When we started doing all the research and going down this rabbit hole, we realized that there's a lot. And we actually had to cut out a big chunk of it because there's actually a lot of studies that look at physical occlusion and how that affects skin. So think about your wound dressings. Think about physical barriers to protect skin. They even looked at things like gloves, wearing gloves for too long. How does that affect skin? So we had to cut all this out. And basically, we're going to share with you a paper that was done in 1992. And this, we feel like, represents the occlusion mechanism the best. This is actually done by one of the OG, we would say, pioneers of the moisturizer research space. This is by Marie Loden. And basically, they wanted to understand what would be the impact of applying moisturizer or petrolatum on skin. It's just what happens when you do that.
Yeah, so we find the study to be a little bit interesting. It's very unique in the way it's set up, so try to hang in there with us.
Yeah.
So they actually ran the study 2 different ways. One is, they have 2 different creams, one with a higher lipid count, one with a lower lipid count, and then one cell uses straight petrolatum. And in the first test, they applied the 3 creams into different patches on the forearm and removed it after just 5 minutes. And they measured TOOL, or the transepidermal water loss, for basically every couple minutes for 20 minutes. And the second study actually look at the same 3 products. They apply it on skin, leave it on for 40 minutes, and then did the same thing, remove the cream, and then measure tool and how it changes through for the next 20 minutes. And it might not be what you expect.
Yeah. So we'll show the results of the study, the scenario 1, where they apply it just for 5 minutes. And you'll see that what happened is suddenly you see a very huge increase in tool, that evaporation, that water loss for these creams. Honestly, there's not really a lot to take away here because they're attributing this to actually the moisture that's within cream. That can contribute to the increase in tool. And maybe this is the release of the water that was absorbed within skin. This is where more data is needed to really prove that aspect of absorption. But this is just within the 5-minute time frame of application.
Yeah, and they draw that takeaway because the petrolatum group, you'll see, it didn't affect the base tool at all. And because petrolatum doesn't have any water content, that's why they drew the conclusion that, because the creams have that water content, they deposited a ton of water to your skin, and with immediate removal, we detect that.
I'm going to just add one more thing here, is that for the petrolatum part, we would say that if you see how tool is essentially flat, that petrolatum doesn't actually do much in the 5-minute application. You could see that it's like basically your tool level has essentially stayed the same. And the reason why we would interpret this way is because if you look at from 0 to the 20-minute mark, there's no change. So we would say like a loose interpretation is that leaving petrolatum on your skin for 5 minutes is kind of like a meh, and it's nothing really happens.
Yeah, but I also hope no one's just wiping it off after 5 minutes.
Exactly. Like who's doing that? Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the other kind of final point on the 5-minute study.
Yeah. What's interesting is scenario 2 is applying it, leaving it on skin for 40 minutes, then wiping it off. We acknowledge that most people actually leave it on all day. No one's wiping off. These are leave-on products. But you can see a very stark difference and almost a reverse of the graph. On the petrolatum, the immediate tool is really, really high. And over 20 minutes, eventually return to baseline. And the creams didn't have that increase in tool initially, but after 20 minutes also return to base level. Whereas the 2 creams, there is that increase in tool still, but just nowhere near the level of petrolatum, and also return slowly to baseline after 20 minutes. This to us is like super fascinating interpretation. The study kind of attribute that to, the petrolatum across these 40 minutes is really good at sealing in moisture. And remember, we mentioned that tool is a natural phenomenon. Your skin is constantly trying to evaporate water. So petrolatum is trapping the water, the moisture in skin in these 40 minutes. So there's a buildup of water that otherwise would have evaporated, but it's being kept in your skin. So when you clean off the petrolatum, that seal basically has been broken, and you immediately see that water, the water buildup release and measured as tool.
Exactly, that like excess spike in tool. Yeah, for sure.
And the creams have a lot less buildup because during that time it isn't as occlusive as petrolatum. So there's still some tool to a lesser extent, and therefore less water buildup during this time.
Yeah, and then the cool thing is then you see skin kind of slowly get back to its basal or just its normal tool level. So we find this just generally fascinating in how it kind of shows like the mechanism of occlusives, and what Gloria was describing and like that buildup of water. That has actually been studied multiple times. And so I do want to read an excerpt from a review paper on occlusives that talks about this general occlusive phenomenon. The paper writes, healthy stratum corneum typically has a water content of about 10 to 20%. Occlusion can block diffusional water loss from the skin surface, increasing stratum corneum hydration, swelling the corneocytes, and promoting water uptake into intercellular lipid domain. So just think fatty, juicy, just almost like a sponge of a water, like a hydrated sponge. So water content can be increased up to 50% with occlusion. Even short time, like 30-minute exposure, can result in significantly increased stratum corneum hydration. With 24-hour occlusion, the relative water content in stratum corneum can be increased significantly from 53% without occlusion to 59%. So hopefully this paints a picture of what occlusion can do, because I do feel like everyone has a very basic knowledge of like, great, I've sealed it in, I've protected my skin, I'm like good to go. But you don't realize like the actual true impact of that and kind of that water intake for skin, how helpful that can be, especially for compromised skin or very dry skin.
Yeah. Another interesting takeaway here is that the tool level does return to baseline in 20 minutes. So what it does, it really is that mechanical instant action of applying it topically, this doesn't look into how it may or may not affect your skin barrier in the long run. So just, that's what it is. That's what occlusion does.
Yeah. Also, this is going off tangent a little bit, but I did have to share while we were doing research, we stumbled on a lot of like saran wrap studies, which was quite fun. Basically, they were like saran wrap people's arms for multiple days just to see what would happen. And just for funsies, I did want to share like a little bit of a snippet of the results. So after physically occluding skin with saran wrap, they found that your microbiome can shift temporarily.
Wow.
And just basically your flora changes a lot.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And obviously your skin moisture does increase, but they found that it only increased in the first 24 hours. After that, it didn't really do much after that. So it does
make sense.
It does level out.
I mean, it does make sense. I feel like it gets to a point where the gradient is basically done. There's no gradient and there's no more water to come out.
Exactly. And then the final thing, which I thought was very odd, was apparently they found a skin pH increase to about 7. So
drama.
Yeah. So if you've ever thought about what would happen if you saran wrap your skin for too long, that's what happens. I don't think you have to do that.
Yeah, I don't think our listeners are at risk of accidentally walking around with saran wrap.
You never know, man.
On their face
TikTok
for 3 to 5 days.
These days.
Oh my, you're right. Actually, you're right. Someone just might try that. Hey guys, I found the perfect way to seal in moisture at night. Just cut 2 holes in saran wrap. You will never believe it. This is cheaper than any mask on the market. Wow, I can see it.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, you basically wrote the script for them.
If that goes viral with someone else doing it,
She's going to take a hiatus. All right. So hopefully we paint a picture of what occlusives can do. We should move on to petrolatum. Why is petrolatum the gold standard?
I like how I'm taking this time just to take a long sip of my tea. That we are moving on to petrolatum, but let me take a sip. But yes, petrolatum.
Been around forever. I'll just put it that way.
And the thing is, it's kind of interesting. Victoria, when she was doing research, we were able to find a lot of general studies on occlusion, what it does for skin, and these are really fun. But there are very, very few hard data on like how occlusive some of these ingredients are. We get a lot of questions that's like, oh, is squalane as occlusive as mineral oil, is this and that? And all we can say is, I don't know. I don't know.
We don't always have the answers. I'm sorry, guys.
There's simply not a lot of data on it. We did find a couple of studies we find to paint a better picture. So we're going to dive into one of them. This one looks at petrolatum, paraffin oil, jojoba oil, and sweet almond oil, my favorite oil.
Cora's favorite. Seriously favorite.
This one looks at a very interesting metric. If you see on the left of if you look at the y-axis, it actually measures, instead of tool, it measures stratum corneum swelling. So as a percent increase from baseline, like Victoria mentioned from the study earlier, when that water builds up in your stratum corneum, your cells are like slurping up water, and it creates this like fattening effect.
With double C.
Thick with on the juicy level. Now on my dead cell is building up so much level.
That's a good discrepancy.
So they actually used a in vivo Raman spectroscopy to measure the stratum corneum thickness. We want to say that this study is very unique in that this method isn't super common. So because it's not a tool study, so we should just mention that, so it's not like an apples to apples comparison.
And typically how that's measured is the spectroscopy actually uses a laser, and it's able to basically identify certain molecules based on its bonds. And through that, you're able to do a bunch of very fancy calculations to give you a water concentration profile, and inevitably through that calculate the thickness. So, but it's a very cool tool. It's just not very commonly used in our realm. And I think it's because of the
cost.
Yes. All right. So in this study, like Gloria mentioned, they wanted to look at petrolatum in comparison to these 3 oils. This is after 30 minutes of post-treatment. They looked at skin and found that petrolatum was significantly, I guess, fattier, more swollen than the sites that use these other oils. And that's kind of one comparison of petrolatum to some of these other ingredients. I'm sure some of you are wondering, well, these are emollients, right? They're oils. And they're like, yeah, true, exactly. There's not a lot of studies that are going to be like looking hardcore at petrolatum, dimethicone, shea.
Yeah.
But it does give us a sense of how much more occluding petrolatum can be. And then I did want to also mention that you might also say, well, does that mean that some of these oils do have some occlusive property? And you're like, yes.
With an asterisk. Like,
yes.
TM, the chemist, yes. Yes, but...
yes. And the thing is, Gloria and I, we've thought about this a lot. And ultimately, we feel that it is very difficult to figure out which oils are truly occlusive and are not.
Because there's no data. There's very few data.
And we're not doing that study ourselves.
Yeah, correct.
So that's why we generally like to point people to the kind of more the typical butters and waxes instead. Obviously, things like mineral oil, they do have occlusive properties. But to kind of showcase if there are other oils out there and their comparison to petrolatum, we did find another paper that actually wanted to see if they could actually find an oil that was comparable to petrolatum. And we do give them credit for trying to do that.
Yep. Yeah. And this brings us back to tool. We're back to this again. This paper looked at, it's another forearm study that measured tool measurements. It's done on the forearm with 80 volunteers split into 4 different cells. And what they did this time, and this is where you can feel the pain of us doing the research, because every paper, the study is just a little bit different. This one looked at, they apply the products, didn't take it off. They just kind of measures tool as the product wears throughout the day. And they measured it at 15 minutes, 2 hours, and then 6 hours to see how much tool has decreased from the baseline. And we'll put up the chart here. First of all, I should point out that the chart is a little wonky. It's not absolute measurement of tool. It's expressed as a reduction of tool after emollient application as a % decrease from baseline. And you'll see that immediately after 15 minutes, petrolatum is the highest at 16.5 decrease from the baseline. But a lot of the oils didn't do that bad. Sunflower oil clocks in at 13.3, sorry. Pecan, which is not a very common ingredient in skincare, actually, because we had to Google what's Carria illinoisensis seed oil. Illinoisensis. It's pecans. Do people say pecans or pecan?
I say pecan.
I think I
But there's definitely a group that says pecan.
I digress. Maybe it's an Atlanta thing. Pecan.
No, it's definitely a southern thing.
Yeah.
Pecan pie.
Yeah. So, pecan oil clocks in 14.2%, which when we're talking about small studies, it's in that kind of too close to call area already. And then it goes down to, what is Ricinus communis?
That is castor seed.
Castor seed oil, my bad. Castor seed oil drops down dramatically to 10.1%. Sweet almond also in that 10 realm, and canola oil also around that at 9.4. Whew. So what's interesting is how it wears over time. As you can expect, at the 2-hour mark, well, I don't know if you expect it, but at the 2-hour mark, we see that the wear stays pretty well. Most of these cells stay kind of on par at the 15-minute measurement. So petrolatum dropped a little bit from 16.5 to 14.8. And sunflower seed oil actually increased from 13.3 to 15.5. Now it's really on par with petrolatum. And a pecan went all the way up to 16.2. We also see this increase in protection or like increase. This is what my problem with this chart is. I have to say words like it increased the amount of tool, it decreased. So amount of improvement in tool. Castor oil also increased a little bit, whereas sweet almond and canola also continued the decrease trajectory.
I did want to mention that I think the general conclusion from this paper is that petrolatum it's still the gold standard in terms of being able to like almost immediately reduce tool.
Yep.
However, these emollients, these occlusive emollients, I guess, they can work slightly different where it's the delayed reaction, a possible delayed reaction of increasing, or I guess like of that occlusion behavior. And I think the other takeaway is the reason why I want to share this with you guys is to show that not all of these emollients do the same thing.
They're all very different.
Yeah, so you can see that sunflower and pecan, they can be very helpful. Some of these other ones maybe not so efficient. So that's why it's just kind of a cool comparison to show you that the emollient category is wild and also kind of almost like in a way supporting some of the other petrolatum data of just its behavior within like 15 minutes. Yeah.
Yep. And with natural wear and tear at the 6-hour mark, most of them have decreased pretty dramatically, and we can expect that. It's been close to a full day of wear and tear, but the effect still lingers. Your tool is still being lessened. They're still in effect. But yeah, like Victoria said, this kind of highlights why we don't like talking about
like hard comparisons.
Is this oil more occlusive than the other? I don't know. This is one paper we're able to find on some common, some not so common oil in skincare. And more often than not, especially because there's so many oils to choose from in skincare, there's no data whatsoever. The lipid profile will matter a lot. But if you look at lipid profile of these oils and you draw conclusions from it, that's also very dangerous because they're all different.
I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
So the takeaway is, oils help. To what degree?
We don't know. Depends.
Yeah.
All right. So, but ultimately, petrolatum, the reason why, it gets that spotlight is because it has the most data.
Yes.
It's been around the longest.
Ooh.
So the understanding around it, for the most part, has generally been pretty well tested.
Yeah. We just went over 3 papers that all demonstrated petrolatum's effectiveness as an occlusive, whereas there's one paper apiece on like, maybe sweet almond oil doesn't work very well.
No, not at all. So we've given petrolatum the spotlight. So we should definitely talk about why petrolatum is so controversial.
Now really wake me up when we're done with this part.
Okay. I guess everyone should strap in.
Yes.
It's a bit of a story.
Yes. Tell us, Grandpa.
Petrolatum is controversial ultimately because of where it comes from. Because it's a petroleum byproduct. So everyone's freaking out because it sounds so toxic. Now, in cosmetics, we use USP grade petrolatum. We'll get into that more. But the key thing to remember here is that petrolatum, because it's been around for so long, it's been around since like 1872, it's given a CAS number. And this is an identification or a registration number and it's used for every chemical in scientific literature. And this CAS number is given to every single type of petrolatum.
I just found that out and I think it's bonkers.
Yeah, you're talking about petrolatum that's used in the motor industry to petrolatum that's used as a food additive. So this is where and is why there's so much confusion and why people seem to just gravitate toward it as it being very toxic, because there's a lot of labeling and there's a lot of lists that come out that because they all use the same CAS number, it just makes you feel like it's very not safe.
Yeah. And this is part of the reason why sometimes you'll hear really scary fear-mongering pieces talk about how like petrolatum causes cancer. It's the same as motor oil. It's absolutely not. But when you look at the CAS number, it says it's the same thing.
One of the scares that comes from petrolatum is, something called a PNA. This is a polycyclic aromatic compound, or
you might also hear some papers or some articles out there refer to this as PAH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons.
Sure. And is basically the main cancer-causing concern. And it's because of this that the FDA had to pass a purity test. And we'll say this now is that now the petrolatum that we use in the industry is an ultra-refined material. It goes through a very complicated process. Well, is it no, it's super.
It's a very effective process. It's
basically, it's a hydrogenation process that involves a lot of heat and pressure to separate all of those unwanted purities. This is a standard process that is required in order to get that USP grade. Now, this USP grade, there's different categories. We won't get into too much of the details, but I think probably the only thing I do want to mention here is that for the FDA and the US, there's essentially 2 types, white petrolatum USP and petrolatum USP. The only difference here is generally the color. But in the EU, the European Pharmacopoeia, they label it slightly different, where it's white petrolatum USP and yellow soft paraffin. So I just wanted, I think sometimes people get wrapped up in like paraffin versus petrolatum versus mineral oil. So we do want to just kind of paint you that picture and how even in regulatory bodies, it can be labeled slightly different. All right. So knowing all that, knowing that, thank God, there's a standard, there's a grade that has to pass. We'll talk about some of the recent concerns that have had to be addressed regarding petrolatum. So the first thing is somehow they found out, they did a bunch of animal testing. They found that there is a very small portion of this hydrocarbon that's being absorbed in a very very particular strain of rat, the Fisher 344.
I didn't even know that that's a thing.
Yeah. And a lot of these toxicology studies, how they get these profiles is by doing ingestion models. And so they look at how they're, I guess, doing these sorts of tests is looking at the accumulation in the liver and your lymph nodes. And so they found that in the Fisher rat, they did find some accumulation. But they found that they didn't find this in any other type of animal model. And they found that in all the other animals, they were able to clear the oil from their systems over time. And it was eventually like eliminated, like they had eliminated it from their diet and it had passed. So the FDA looked at this and they basically said, yeah, we're not going to change anything.
Looks good to us.
Yeah, we're good here. And then the European regulators decided they would have a more limited concentration in food for these mineral oils and waxes. So that was the general reaction after that.
The highlight from all of the study is these are all done with an abundance of precautions. These are very like high level studies. And again, the pathway is injection, it's not topical. And even through all of that, these USP grade petrolatum has not been linked or implicating any way as a carcinogen. So this should tell you how safe these ingredients really are.
On top of that, it's been looked at by the World Health Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, also by the EU Scientific Committee on Food. And I think the main takeaway here regarding that aspect is that after years of, this is a quote straight from this article, after years of animal feeding studies, there is no evidence that these materials have been implicated as carcinogens.
You don't hear that a lot.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think that gets like put out there enough.
Can of worm. A lot of controversial ingredients, they get called controversial because the verbiage has to be more lukewarm, right? Like sunscreens. Sorry. Like, there hasn't been anything that showed that it may or may not cause cancer. But this is like, there's a ton of data and there's no data on it being carcinogen. It's a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah. And then finally, the other, I would say, piece/ammo that's used to blacklist petrolatum is because it's listed under the Dangerous Substance Directive for the EU.
This gets quoted a lot in those like more fear-mongering pieces. I'll talk about why you shouldn't use petrolatum in your skincare. It's dangerous because of this.
Yeah. And so what this Dangerous Substance Directive is basically a bunch of lists. And the list we care about is the CMR, which is a consolidated list of substances that are considered carcinogens, mutagens, or toxic to reproduction. On this list, you will find under a category 2 carcinogen, 7 entries for petrolatum. One of them is for oxidized petrolatum. 5 of these describe various processing schemes for making petrolatum, and one of them is a description and CAS number. Do you remember that CAS number that I mentioned in the beginning? That is listed as well. And this is where all of that confusion comes in, because on this list, none of these descriptions actually define the purity, the general PNA content, any sort of spec. It's super general. So you're talking about, like I said, any petrolatum that's used from the motor industry to food. And that's why it's used as ammo for people, because they feel like it's a carcinogen. The EU has listed it as a carcinogen, a category 2 carcinogen. So sadly enough, it's because of that dumb number. That's it.
Stupid CAS number.
Yes. But we can tell you that the USP grading, the FDA's required testing for petrolatum, all of that would basically, all of the FDA's regulations on this would basically make this not a concern. And there are a couple asterisks on the list that basically do talk about how, like, oh, if it goes through this processing, then
we're good.
Then it's like not really, shouldn't, like, that is kind of an outlier. And so it would fall that carcinogen label. And that's kind of the asterisk to this petrolatum being on this list. So I guess the point of us talking to you about this and sharing this is to say that, yes, we know it's on the list. It needs an update, basically.
Yeah.
Petrolatum, there's so many grades. Even with cosmetics, we could tell you that you can manipulate the ratios of some of these hydrocarbons and the mineral oil, and you can get very different textures. It's
different melting points.
Exactly. The feel, finish. It's a really refined process, and there are FDA measures in place to make sure that what we use in skin and in food is the right grade.
Yep.
And that's it. There's no real reason to worry outside of that. Yeah.
Yep. So all this to say is someone, for the love of God, just update the numbers. But we can move on from all this. So,
Yeah.
yep.
I think the idea is that if you, hopefully when you read another article that'll come out about how toxic petrolatum is, you won't have to worry. Yeah.
Yep. It is generally, it's a very established ingredient and it is a byproduct of the petroleum industry, but the processing is very, very simple and very, very effective. And yeah, that's it. That's all we have to say about this.
I think another thing we always like to remind people is it's ingredients like these that make us feel safe. Like it's the ones that don't have any testing or the regulatory regulatory is not looking at, or it's not on their radar, that you're like, huh, okay, there's definitely a lot of questions to be asked. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really dense. I hope this was fun for you guys, because this is very fun for us.
The takeaway is occlusives bueno.
And petrolatum bueno. But we have to break it up now.
Yeah, you're right. All right, it's time to break it up. Break it up. Woo! It's Animal Fun Fact Corner.
Woo!
All right, today we've been talking about animal menaces, so I had to talk about a local menace. This is called the nutria. The name is like, I don't know who named this.
Sounds like a collagen supplement.
Yeah. But it's also called the koi poo.
Also weird. No longer like a collagen supplement, but weird.
Yeah. So the nutria resembles a very large rat/beaver hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a small and long tail small, long, and skinny hairless tail. That's why it kind of looks like a rat. It is also called a swamp rat. You'll hear that too.
Sounds attractive already.
The adults are typically they can vary anywhere between 9 and 20 pounds.
Not a small rat.
Not that small. 16 to 24 inches in body length.
Medium-sized rat. Small dog-sized rat.
Yeah. And what's kind of strong characteristic of a swamp rat is their teeth are very orange. I'm going to Google it for Gloria so she knows what we're looking at.
Why?
It's like first picture, orange buck teeth. Yeah. So the thing about this rat is that it's very good at reproducing. So one female, their gestation lasts about 130 days, which is quite short. They can give birth to as few as 1 or as many as 13.
That's quite a range.
Yep. And on average, they can have about 4, and they'll usually mate within 2 days after their offspring is born. That's like how efficient they are. Yeah. So in 1 year, they could have, about 2 litters. And anyways, that's kind of the fun fact about them. The reason why I want to share them is because they've actually been a menace in California.
Oh.
Who knew? I had no clue. And basically, what I didn't even know about California is that they have wetlands.
You forget that when you're in Southern California. It is very much not wet.
It's so true. And so it's actually been a battle for a few years, where because their populations have grown so much,
of course,
they are destroying all of the wetland habitats in California. And recently, they have passed like $10 million. They rewarded like $10 million to go and try to eradicate this population.
My goodness.
So I didn't know this. Let me just pull up.
Rodent, when you combine the word rodent and outbreak or infestation, you just know. It's like one of those things that you see. It's like if you live in New York and you see one rat, you're like, oh man, I think it's at least a family of 20 over there.
Yeah. So basically, didn't realize there were wetlands. But these guys are, they basically can destroy up to 25% of our wetland habitat because of the sheer amount of population growth.
Oh boy.
And this has been a problem since like roughly 2019. It's actually been a problem previously as well, where they thought they had eradicated it and then realized they find more of these guys.
Of course.
And it's not the most fun to eradicate because you gotta like go into the marshes and set traps.
Oh god.
And your traps aren't always catching these guys. And so yeah. Anyways, I found this generally fascinating and tragic, I guess. But the good news is that apparently the population is declining.
Yay.
So it is working. It's just taking some time. Yeah, so I think one of the stats here that I thought was fascinating was like the nutria can grow more than 20 pounds. It's a really big rat. If
Yeah.
you think about in dog size, it's like a Maltese, bigger than
It's
a
not
Maltese.
not a small dog.
And they can eat up to 25% of their body weight each day.
Oh my god! Oh my god! My
So yeah,
my cat in his peak is like 15 pounds. This thing can probably eat my cat. And
Yep.
15 pounds is not a small cat.
No, not at all. You're right. It's bigger than average domestic cats. And one of the things they actually had to do, which I feel like has been a pain point when we talk about some of these animals, is the California did have to reverse their no hunting policy on these guys. I'm like, okay, thank God.
So I have to ask, is it gratifying for hunters to get giant
swamp
rats?
rat?
Yeah, they're just like, yeah, great, I got a swamp rat. It just feels like if there's a hunting video game and you're
I
shooting
know.
ducks and then you get a swamp rat, you probably get like a thumbs down. You want a duck, but you got a rat.
50 cents for the swamp
Yeah,
rat.
all right.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's the nutria.
Yay, swamp rats!
Swamp rats on the decline. Woohoo! Save the wetlands.
Woo! California could use more wetlands for
That's
sure.
true. All right. So we're going to move on. I'm going to wrap this up with meat part 2.
Ooh, no more
All right.
dense studies. Let's just
Yeah.
get to the shopping aisles.
Yeah. All right. So we decided that when we looked at the landscape, there are 3 tiers of occlusives.
We are so good at breaking things up into tiers nowadays. Look forward to a chart soon as well.
God damn it.
And I think we can thank the trend slugging being
Yeah.
so hyped up in the past like couple of years.
Mhm.
Because I think other than basically like really boring, like Aquaphor or Vaseline, they're boring. You don't
Really boring.
you don't have a lot of like balmy or textures that
Mm.
actually say it is thicker and
Mhm.
heavier.
Mhm.
But since slugging is such a thing, we're starting to see this realm get a lot wider. And when it gets
Mhm.
wider, it gets a little crazy. So category 1, we're gonna call this occlusives light.
We find that this category is just a lot of the oils. If you remember in meat part 1, and this is probably the most mysterious category for us.
Mhm.
And the reason why we call this light is because as chemists, we're a bit of wizard. We can figure out ways to really thicken oils,
Mhm.
gellify oils, basically create the illusion of really good occlusion. And so that's why it's really difficult to know how effective some of these occlusive light products can be. And so there's, we're actually not going to be able to speak too much to, how occlusive these products are, but we can give you a sense of what kind of products fall into this category.
Yep.
So the first one is Cocoa Kinds. I believe it's their Ceramide Recovery Balm. In the ingredient list, you will find safflower seed oil, shea butter, squalane, grapeseed oil, castor seed oil, sunflower seed wax. So generally this like very much plant combo.
Yep. There's a good amount of oil and butter to give you that like creamy, like more balmy texture. This does come in a tube, so it's a more squeezable version of this, but there's still a good amount of oil. So that's why it's like, okay, it's a much lighter blend of these waxes.
One really annoying side comment that Gloria's gonna hate that I said this is that shea butter, it can be anything from a very light liquid to
I'm making my best swamp wrap impression right now.
to a very thick butter. So also a very difficult category for us. It's the same as dimethicone.
It is, yeah.
Because there are some dimethicones that are pretty good occlusives. So yeah. Anyway, so it's kind of an annoying fact. Yeah.
Fun fact, if you're a chemist, you will know, you will learn. You'll see all the different versions of the same thing. Anyway, next, actually, I really like this example is Future Vice.
Did you go
German?
Gloria went German on.
Future Vice. This is slug balm. The ingredient list is very short and very simple. We reach hydrogenated vegetable oil, hexadecanol, bisabolol. Oh man. Acetyl hydroxyproline palmitamide and rapeseed sterols, citric acid, stearic acid. Pretty sure ingredient list.
Yeah.
What's interesting here is like there isn't anything that is super duper waxy. The vegetable oil again is another one of those things. Hydrogenated vegetable oil is like a slightly thicker oil, but still a vegetable oil.
And in one of the studies, I think they looked at it, and obviously they're again different types, but not the most effective occlusive.
Yeah, and visible as a third ingredient is a telltale sign that it's by far the most concentrated in the hydrogenated vegetable oil with a little bit of hexadecanol, which is also an oil. It's a pretty fatty alcohol. And yeah, and that's it. That's actually it.
Yeah. So we would say this is one that we would say occlusive light
Plus.
to the light square.
Occlusive light square.
Yeah. So this is one that could be, very different expectation than even the cococaine one.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's I guess it's products like these where, you see oil as probably one of the major components that we would say maybe I don't even know how we would I want to say, do we want to recommend this for a certain skin type?
Well, I think the occlusive is one of those categories where you might have to just listen to your skin a little bit.
That's a good point.
Because they do vary so far and wide in between. I
Yeah.
will say if you're someone that's and generally speaking, I would opt for the more occlusive ones.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because the lighter ones won't do something for you, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, I kind of think of these as really like rescue in a pinch products.
Yeah.
If this is kind of a lukewarm or occlusive side, it might not be that much more occlusive than your standard moisturizer.
So
So
true.
then what purpose does it serve?
Yeah. So I think it's just trying to manage the expectation and goal. Of
That's the theme of this whole
That's
podcast.
true.
Is we are the wet blanket to your
to your occlusive dreams.
Not that occlusive.
Ooh.
Tamper your expectations.
Yeah. But anyways, this category exists. That's it. We're moving on.
Category 2.
All right. These we would consider true occlusive blends. And when we say that, these are truly just your Vaseline blends.
Yes.
So, like Gloria pointed out, Aquaphor was the one we decoded last episode. CeraVe is another one that I think has about roughly 40%.
46.5.
There you go. 46.5%. That's blended with mineral oil, paraffin, azocaride, dimethicone. Definitely stuff that's meant to lighten and give probably a cleaner finish, along with their classic ceramide blend. And then, well, we have to talk about it. We also have our Balm Voyage as well.
Which is back in stock any day now.
Yeah, also a blend that includes ceramides. We would say this is probably a great starting point, actually, for anyone that wants to dabble in this category, just because you are getting a pretty clear amount of occlusives, and then go from there.
Yep. So this is I think the category that should be the most popular, I would think, because it gives you great occlusion, but still gives you a range of textures to choose from, and that you can find one that works for your skin.
That's a good point. Yeah. So we recommend starting here. And then finally, we have Vaseline.
Yeah.
Just good old Vaseline, pure petrolatum. This is the category we would point people to for compromised skin barriers. If you're dealing with things like eczema, you've got babies, I guarantee you a lot of times when all else fails, you are appointed to just pure Vaseline because it is pure. So you know exactly what you're putting on skin and how skin's reacting to it.
Yep.
And like we've pointed out in part 1, tons of studies that are actually testing
this
petrolatum.
is very safe. Yep, this is actually about as vanilla as it goes. Like Victoria mentioned, if you're really struggling and category 2 doesn't quite cut it, or you still find that some of these products might be irritating because category 2 is a little bit more complex, then definitely reach for Vaseline. And we definitely say it's a unique category on its own, and we didn't put any like simple plant waxes here because you can also find tubs of just maybe shea butter, and something else is plant waxes tend to be a lot more complex, chemically speaking, than good old Vaseline. So that's why we really recommend this for someone who's really struggling with a good, simple occlusive.
Totally. All right. And finally, we should talk about how to use occlusives. We're going to interview Gloria because she does more slugging than I do. I think the first question that everybody wants to know is, should you slug? Should everyone slug?
Actually, this is one where I feel like, no, not everyone needs to slug. Slugging, or like the concept of applying a thin layer of occlusive over your face to like really, really sealing moisture, to me is an you need type of skincare treatment. And if you're oily, or even if you have normal skin, you're like, I think my skin's fine. Am I missing out by not slugging? You don't need to
You're
think about
good.
it that way.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's basically, and how often, oh, you didn't even ask me that. Yeah, so yeah, that's my take on that.
And to follow up, Laura,
Mhm.
how often do you recommend slugging?
Again, this is a little unusual
Yeah.
for our suggestions. We love to tell like, oh, consistency is key. Like you
Mm,
need to do this like whatever once a week or anything like that. But with slugging, I take is actually just do it whenever you feel the need to.
yeah.
It's especially good when you feel like skin is very compromised. When you have that like, you're out for too long in the city or something and you feel a whiplash, it's the winter winds, or you are a little bit, you over exfoliated. Those are great times to slug if you're feeling really extra dry.
Yeah.
If you remember from meat part 1, just get your cells to be that like really puffed up state. And that's it. You really don't need to be doing that every night.
Yeah.
If you're in a pinch, the most I've done is back to back 2 nights. And that was enough to kind of help me recover
Yeah.
from a really tragically dry flight.
Yeah.
And that's it. And just listen to your skin here.
I think that's so important because with many trends, it feels like it's a permanent place in your routine.
Mhm.
And this is one of those where it feels like you're in a pinch moment. So that's a really good thing to highlight because I think a lot of people, because of the trends, are like, oh my God, we've had people that have told us they slug every night. And we're like,
That's impressive dedication to the art of slugging.
it doesn't have to be like that.
It really doesn't. And
I hope skin doesn't need that because I actually don't think that's a good thing long term.
yeah, well, if you think about this is the conclusion is far-fetched, so bear with me here. From the studies, occlusion is supposed to swell skin and give that instant like really like punch up the hydration level. But if you end up occluding skin given that like saran wrap effect every day, it really doesn't need it. Tool is natural. It does happen.
Yes.
You're just trying to take it back down to a more baseline level. You're not
Yes.
trying to stop tool.
Yes.
So-
Also, give more credit to your skin's ability to adapt and
Yes.
heal as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, for sure. I think that's great. Anyways, all right. So that is the end of our Occlusives episode.
Yay!
Was it helpful?
Tell us, please.
Does it make you like Occlusives more? We hope because they can be very helpful. But
Yeah. So let us know. Let us know what else you want us to talk about. I feel that the soul leave my body.
Laura's like,
May this be helpful.
all right. So if you have any burning skincare, if you have any burning skincare questions, you can write to us at info@chemistconfessions.com. Check out our website, chemistconfessions.com. Also, sign up for the Hatchery if you are someone who has more irritation prone, you got redness, might have a congestion scenario. Also, if you have feelings about our blank slate cleanser, we would love for you to sign up
Good
for Hatchery.
or bad.
Good or bad. And then you can also DM us on Instagram at chemist.confessions or simply have your questions in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.